Welcome to US Briefing. On tension, Kylie Minogue shows she's still pop's leading lady. Telegraph. Australian pop star Kylie Minogue has released her 16th album, Tension. The album includes dance hit Padam Padam, which has become Minogue's biggest hit in the US in over 20 years. At the age of 55, Minogue recently announced she will begin a Las Vegas residency in November. Despite pop music being a fickle industry, Minogue has remained one of Europe's leading pop stars since 1987, partly thanks to her incredible pop instinct and her ability to ride synth hooks. Tension ranks as one of Minogue's best albums to date, featuring a range of catchy and uplifting dance pop songs. Doomsday cult run by The Messiah accused of child sex abuse. Telegraph. Save the Children has called on the Filipino government to intervene in a situation in which 1,500 children are being sexually abused by a doomsday cult on a remote island in the southern Philippines. The group, Socorro Bayanihan Services, claims to have at least 3,500 members and is led by J. Rance Biquilario, who calls himself the Messiah. The group is accused of sexually exploiting children, forcing them into marriage, and running a covert drugs operation protected by a private army. In addition, children have allegedly been forced into labor and physically assaulted. Enough drugs to kill thousands found at nursery where child died of fentanyl exposure. Telegraph. Police officers found a large quantity of fentanyl and other drugs hidden underneath a trap door in the play area of a nursery in New York City. The discovery was made after a 1-year-old boy died from an opioid overdose at the nursery. Pictures released by the police showed bags filled with drugs and drug paraphernalia. 3 other children were hospitalized after being poisoned by the drug. The nursery's owner and her tenant have been charged with narcotics possession with intent to distribute resulting in death, and could face life in prison if convicted. Europe's Peterson hits hole-in-one at Solheim Cup. The Independent. Emily Christine Peterson made a hole-in-one during the Solheim Cup, boosting Europe's chances against the USA. Peterson's ace on the 12th hole helped level the match against Jennifer Kupcho and Elizan Korpas. Despite a difficult start for Europe, the hole-in-one could ignite their bid for a third straight Solheim Cup victory. The United States swept the morning session and led 4-0 on day 1. However, the European team is hoping to turn things around with Peterson's remarkable shot. Capitol rioter who attacked AP photographer, police officers sentenced to 5 years in prison. The Globe and Mail. Rodney Millstrade, a man who attacked an Associated Press photographer and threw a flagpole and smoke grenade at police officers guarding the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Prosecutors said Millstrade had injected steroids and armed himself with a 4-foot wooden club disguised as a flagpole. He pleaded guilty in April to assault charges and possessing an unregistered firearm. Millstrade was arrested in May 2022 in Colorado, where he had been working. A cache of weapons and ammunition was found at his Maryland home. If you want a centrist Republican, vote Trump. Telegraph. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has again made headlines, this time for his moderate views on abortion and support for striking union workers. In an interview with NBC's Meet the Press, Trump called for negotiations on the issue of abortion and criticized a 6-week abortion ban in Florida. The following day, it was announced that Trump would be joining striking auto workers in Detroit. These actions set him apart from other Republican candidates and show a willingness to appeal to moderate voters. Trump has a history of adopting popular positions to bolster his support. The West must arm Ukraine with atoms now. That way Putin will be defeated. Telegraph. The West, particularly the US, must act quickly to provide Ukraine with the necessary weapons to defeat Russia, according to Colonel Hamish de Breton Gordon. He argues that the West has been too slow in supplying Ukraine with the weapons it needs and that this has allowed Russia to continue its aggression. He suggests that the US should deploy its ATACMS long-range artillery system to silence Russian guns in Crimea and enable Ukraine to retake the territory. He warns that if the West does not act, Russia may go on to invade Poland and other countries. Netanyahu tells UN that Israel is at the cusp of a historic agreement with Saudi Arabia. The Toronto Star. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke at the UN General Assembly, stating that Israel is on the brink of a historic peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. However, he did not provide a clear path to achieving such an accord. There are several obstacles, including Saudi Arabia's demand for progress in the creation of a Palestinian state and their desire for a defense pact with the US and help in building their own civilian nuclear program. Netanyahu also criticized Iran and called for increased sanctions over their nuclear program. Prime Video to introduce advertisements, increase cost for ad-free streaming. The Toronto Star. Prime Video, Amazon's streaming service, will introduce advertisements on its platform next year. The cost for the service will remain the same for those willing to sit through commercial breaks. The company has not announced how much the ad-free tier will cost, but in the United States, it will cost an extra $2.99 per month to avoid ads. This move follows the introduction of similar plans by competitors like Netflix and Crave. Harris allies and key Democrats rally around Vice President amid party hand-wringing. CNN. Allies of Vice President Kamala Harris and other prominent Democrats are sending a clear message to their fellow party members who speculate that she should be replaced as President Joe Biden's running mate in 2024. It's time to stop it. It's not only a distraction, it's offensive, Maryland Governor Wes Moore told CNN in an interview. The vice president has faced renewed calls from some pundits and columnists to be dropped from the ticket amid heightened concerns about the president's age and doubts over her ability to lead if Biden were no longer able. It's at least the second major go-around of questioning whether Harris's rightful place is by Biden's side for the 2024 contentious race, leaving her office tired of the fraught conversation, according to a person familiar with the dynamic. Everybody's sort of over it, the person said. The feeling is shared across most of the Democratic spectrum, who hope the party turns their sights on former President Donald Trump or whomever the Republican presidential nominee will be, instead of hand-wringing about themselves. A source close to the Biden campaign told CNN, "People need to get on board and recognize every time they undermine the vice president, they undermine the campaign. We cannot afford to lose to these Republicans. So, get on board." There have both been private and public efforts to deliver this message. Privately, according to a person familiar with campaign operations, the Biden campaign contacted both former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Representative Jamie Raskin, a Maryland Democrat, after neither directly answer repeated questions from CNN about whether Harris was the best running mate for Biden on the 2024 ticket. The campaign asked Pelosi and Raskin to clarify their comments, and both lawmakers later cleaned up their remarks to offer direct messages of support. Raskin told CNN in a follow-up statement Friday that Vice President Harris has excelled in perhaps the most ambiguous and challenging job in our constitutional system, and she is unquestionably the best running mate for President Biden in 2024. Pelosi's office offered no additional statement but pointed CNN to the praise Pelosi heaped on Harris in her interview, saying she's very politically astute. "I don't think people give her enough credit." Discussions on how best to shepherd the party along are also happening among groups like the Congressional Black Caucus, who are actively talking about how to combat the replacement chatter and other attacks against the vice president, according to a source familiar with the effort. "Some of us need to say that they are acting in many ways like agents for the MAGA crowd," Reverend Al Sharpton told CNN. He plans to call on Democrats to stop during CBC weekend in Washington, D.C. "I can only think that they are either politically stupid or working for the opposition." And according to conversations with more than a dozen Democratic strategists, elected officials and people close to the vice president, many will join Sharpton in urging Democrats to stop their groaning over the Biden-Harris ticket and end the chatter of potentially replacing the vice president. Publicly, key Democrats have come out to support Harris, casting the lingering doubt as harmful to Biden and his 2024 chances. California Governor Gavin Newsom said of course Harris should be the Democratic 2024 vice presidential nominee. Newsom and Harris are old friends, and sometimes frenemies. "I mean, by definition, if I think this administration lasts 2.5 years, has been one of the most outstanding administrations the last few decades. And she's a member of that administration, she gets to lay and claim credit to a lot of that success." The answer is absolutely, he said in an interview to CNN earlier this week. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Massachusetts Democrat and a former rival who was once iced out by the vice president for her lukewarm support, said Thursday she was proud to support Harris's campaign with Biden. Vice President Harris is a passionate, clear, unyielding advocate for Americans' freedoms, leading the administration's efforts to protect reproductive freedom and strengthen voting rights, Warren said in a statement. "I am proud to support her campaign with President Biden, and I'm confident that the administration's record of delivering for American families will lead them to victory in 2024. There's a lot of people in Washington who would love that job." Many who CNN spoke to believe the origins of the doubt come from a place of misogyny, racism, or jealousy from other Democrats who wish they were in the vice president's spot. Harris is the first woman and first Black and South Asian person in her role. "There's a lot of people in Washington who would love that job," said Jim Messina, a Democratic operative who ran Barack Obama's 2012 campaign. "I think that a lot of the criticism at the vice president is borderline misogynistic, and there's a lot of people who judge her harder than they would judge a male politician in that role." Moore, the only Black governor in the U.S., said, "The attacks on her, they hit different, they hit our ears differently. And I think people should remember that." But others cite Harris's low poll numbers and history of gaffes as reasons to take a second look at her position. Three prominent political columnists collectively suggested politicians like Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, Representative Lauren Underwood of Illinois, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass and Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia as possibilities to replace Harris. Contacted by CNN, each Democrat rejected the notion. "I absolutely do not think Vice President Harris should be dropped," Raimondo told CNN directly. "I fully support Vice President Harris on the ticket. I think she is doing an incredible job as vice president and is a strong leader for our country." Governor Whitmer supports President Biden and Vice President Harris, a spokesperson for the Michigan governor responded. "I've seen the vice president up close and in action in my state, and you couldn't contain the excitement in the room. I'm hard-pressed to imagine a better partner for President Biden," Warnock told CNN. "Kamala Harris is a tremendous leader. I was proud to introduce the Momnibus with her and am pleased we can continue to work together to end disparities in maternal health. I am on Team Biden-Harris and enthusiastically support their re-election in 2024, Underwood said in a statement. Any assertion that there is anyone better qualified to run on the Democratic ticket other than President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris is absolutely ludicrous. I am excited to do my part to ensure that they are both re-elected so that we can continue delivering for the people of this country," Bass said in a statement. Harris keeps her head down. It's unclear whether the latest round of coalescing behind the vice president will be enough to stop all the hand-wringing. Harris and the Biden administration have spent the last several months trying to build up her public profile, bolstering her public schedule to include stops focused on the hot 2024 issue of abortion as well as being the first in-line responder to GOP attacks on freedom. On Thursday, the White House announced she would serve as the head of a newly launched, first-of-its-kind White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, the latest step in the Biden administration's efforts to enact meaningful gun control against the backdrop of a deadlocked Congress. Harris has also beefed up her fundraising efforts, a key signal of her expanded role in the campaign. Biden aides see their path to victory next year embedded firmly in their ability to secure Black voters, women, young people, and other groups that tend to respond warmly to Harris. But this most recent round of speculation comes as Republicans have frequently made Harris a central figure in their campaign trail attacks, with some, such as former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, insinuating that this upcoming election is really about the vice president due to Biden's age. Asked earlier this month about her reaction to constant critiques, Harris said in an interview that it was not new. "They feel the need to attack because they're scared that we will win based on the merit of the work that Joe Biden and I, and our administration, has done," she added. More recently, during a conversation at a Pennsylvania community college on voting rights, Harris did not directly reference the rumbles over her place on the ticket. But in a thinly veiled moment, Harris called those who once doubted her and then candidate Biden's 2020 bid, haters. "So, when people turned out in 2020, even though they were the doubters, I would say, some of the haters. Let's keep it real," Harris said, with some laughter. "There was record turnout, and it's because you voted that Joe Biden's president of the United States and I'm vice president of the United States," she added to a crowd of younger voters. It was reflective of what appears to be her office's larger say-nothing stance, at least publicly. "They've been in the mode of, they're ignoring it," one source familiar with Harris's office told CNN. And those close to Harris say, though she's generally very aware of what people are saying, it's unlikely she'll proactively address the calls for her to leave the ticket. Instead, she'll work through it. "I think she keeps her head down and keep working," Sharpton told CNN. Megan Rapinoe's legacy with U.S. team is bigger than soccer. Associated Press. Megan Rapinoe, the 38-year-old U.S. soccer player, is preparing to retire from the sport. She has shown a more vulnerable side in the lead-up to her retirement, becoming emotional following the U.S. loss to Sweden at this year's Women's World Cup, knowing it would be her final tournament with the national team. Rapinoe will play her final game in a U.S. jersey when the United States faces South Africa at Chicago's Soldier Field. She will also have a few more regular season games for the OL Reign, including a send-off match for local fans in Seattle on October 6. Rapinoe has had an illustrious career, winning a pair of World Cups and both gold and bronze medals at the Olympics. She has scored 63 goals in just over 200 appearances for the United States since her debut in 2006. Rapinoe is also known for her off-the-field advocacy and activism, leading the fight for equal pay between the men's and women's national teams and being outspoken about LGBTQ issues. In 2022, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. Lawmakers author proposal to try to cut food waste in half by 2030. Associated Press. A bipartisan coalition of U.S. lawmakers has submitted legislation aimed at cutting food waste in half by 2030. The proposal would increase collaboration between the U.S. Department of Agriculture and regional waste prevention and food recovery organizations, as well as supporting technological innovations. The legislation was proposed by Democratic Representative Chellie Pingree and Republican Representative Mike Lawler in the House, and Democratic Senator Chris Coons and Republican Senator Jerry Moran in the Senate. Pingree said that between 30% and 40% of the U.S. food supply is wasted annually, harming the environment and contributing to food insecurity. From UPS to Detroit, 3 automakers, U.S. labor unions flex muscle. Reuters. The U.S. is on track to have its busiest year for strikes since 2019, as tight labor markets, the expiration of union contracts, and high living costs lead to tough negotiations for pay hikes and benefits. Sectors and companies facing tough negotiations include media, automotive, parcel delivery, airlines and aerospace firms, manufacturing, consumer and retail, healthcare, cannabis, and energy. The strikes and protests across industries highlight the growing dissatisfaction among workers and the increasing pressure on companies to meet their demands. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrives on Parliament Hill ahead of address. The Toronto Star. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Canada for a series of meetings with senior Canadian officials. He was welcomed with a ceremony attended by the leaders of House parties and Senate groups, along with the speakers of both chambers. Zelensky expressed gratitude for Canada's support and asked for it to continue. The visit comes with a warning from Canada's Signals Intelligence Agency about possible hacks on government and key service websites. Zelensky is expected to discuss with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau what more Canada can do to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia. Trudeau has called for a complete withdrawal of Russian troops and the creation of a peace pact that respects international law and Ukraine's territorial integrity. Zelensky is also set to address the Canadian Parliament for the second time since the invasion began in February 2022, where he is expected to ask for military aid and support. Ukraine's ambassador to Canada, Yulia Kovalev, has called for more military aid to stop Russia from replenishing its war chest. She warned that Russia is using the time to build fortifications and mine the land, making it difficult for Ukrainian forces to liberate territory. U.S. Energy Department announces $325 million for batteries that can store clean electricity longer. The Globe and Mail. The U.S. Department of Energy has announced a $325 million investment in battery technology. The investment will be used to fund 15 projects in 17 states and will be used to develop long-term storage batteries that can run for longer than 4 hours, addressing the intermittency of renewable energy. The funding is also aimed at reducing costs and bringing down the barriers to battery installation. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.